fascism is imperialism come home, that what we're experiencing in Minneapolis is the same kind of imperialist occupation that occurs globally. And we have stood in solidarity with in struggle across the world, and now it's here today. And the letters and love and support that we see receive not only nationally from comrades, but globally, it really keeps us going. It's quite heartening. I had an opportunity to read some of the love letters to Minneapolis the other day, and it's really what I needed in this struggle in these dark times. Um, I want to speak a little bit to what we've been doing on the ground. So Whipple Watch, like I said, ICE is the regional headquarters for the Upper Midwest. ICE cars come in, ICE agents come into that building and mobilize and gear up, and they spread out across the Midwest. We collect license plates and information on the vehicles as they move in and out of the building. And disseminating that information, we've caught ICE vehicles that we see at Whipple days later in Rice Lake, Fargo, all across the state. And so the work that we do there that continues daily, we have people that show up daily to do this, is very important to keeping our neighbors safe, not only in our city, but across the state. Some of our local rapid response networks, these sprung up in the first weeks of the ICE occupation, and they they have shown to be one of the most effective routes in preventing abduction of neighbors. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of community members on hyper-local chats. And you might have seen some of them get leaked in the press recently. We have dispatch calls where there's neighbors who sit there and support patrollers as they do this intense work in our community, constantly being harassed and intimidated by ICE with threats of murder. Yes, threats of murder, but people still show up and do it every single day. Um, and I just want to say for our chapter also, we've been taking our leaders and putting them out in the community in these rapid response networks. They've been taking on administrative roles, dispatch roles. Our leaders are leading the charge, and the local organizations here have taken note, and we have really made TCDSA someone that people can rely on in the community, and I want to continue that work, and I think that's what's most important here, and that's why we're raising money today. One of the reasons we're raising money is, I mean, this is last week we were raising money for whistles and Know Your Rights Lit costs. Now we're raising funds for respirators and goggles. I don't know what we'll need money for next week. Who's to say? But we're continuing to ask our workers and neighbors to fight. And we need money to keep people out on the streets fighting ICE. We need people to keep standing up. I know you saw hundreds of thousands of people left work last Friday, and we need money to keep them out there to support them as they resist ICE on the streets of Minneapolis and Twin Cities. Thank you, everyone, and fuck ICE.
Thank you, Kai. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here and share that with us in this incredibly stressful and horrifying moment. So, like Kai was saying, we're raising funds for Twin Cities DSA. We're also raising funds for a group called United Renters for Justice. They weren't able to join us, but United Renters for Justice works for permanently affordable democratic housing and structural changes. They are also raising money, like Twin Cities DSA, for supplies and helping their members. But specifically, they help members of their tenant unions and residents of their housing cooperatives to be able to shelter in place. Many of these residents have been forced to shelter in place and forego income with the ICE invasion, but we all know that rent will still be due. So to fight evictions, this group is raising funds, but also calling on the Minneapolis mayor, the county board of commissioner, and Governor Walz to immediately enact an eviction moratorium paired with rental assistance. So these are two, I mean, DSA are Twin Cities DSA, one of our sister chapters, and this group are two organizations were really focusing on they need supplies, they need legal support, they need funds to keep people from being evicted, and so much more. So please do give what you can. Additionally, while you're doing that, take a moment, it really only takes a moment, to email your representatives and demand they do everything in their power to fully defund and abolish ICE. And then finally, if you're not organized into DSA, now is a great time to do it. We're connected and committed to connecting people with the work happening on the ground, both in New York and Minneapolis and everywhere in between. But now I'm thrilled to be able to pass it on and introduce Ari Grant Sassoon, who's a member of Twin Cities DSA, like Kai, and also a member of the Minneapolis Federation of Educators, who can talk about some of the union actions that have been happening on the ground in Minneapolis. Ari, over to you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Ari. I'm a special education assistant for Minneapolis Public Schools. I work with students with special needs in a K through 5 elementary school here in the city. So I'll talk a little bit about what has happened the past couple days, and then kind of get into some of the school stuff at the end. Friday, I'm sure you all heard, was a really massive mobilization. I think it's estimated 50 to 100,000 people I saw was the estimate, march downtown. And it was negative 10 degrees outside, guys. I don't know what else to say. It was cold as fuck. Wore everything I had. It was inspiring. It was a great action. And downtown is cold. It's like those buildings are wind tunnels. There is no sun. It's shady. So it's cold. People were out there. And it was a great moment for the city, I think, in all this darkness. There's a lot of talk around this, being another one of Minneapolis's story general strikes. For me, in my union, as a member, as an organizer in my union, I'm not sure if that's the language I would use, frankly. For us, like, we had a contract campaign this fall. We were days away from going on strike. And when you're about to go on strike, you tell your colleagues, like, your job is to be on the line. If you're not on the line, I don't know what to tell you. You're not in this union as far as I'm concerned. Like, if we're on strike, we're on strike. Everyone's out. Everyone's on the line. And the Minneapolis labor movement signed on to this day of action. There were a lot of union members out there. A lot of people took personal days. A lot of people took time off to be at this event, but that wasn't the language going in, right? We weren't told we are on strike today. And for me, I think that's not a knock on our leaders. It's just a reality check of where we are in terms of our organization, in terms of our associational power, and our ability to mobilize our members around political issues and not just contract issues. And we need to really continue to develop that. And you guys will too eventually. I mean, a political strike is no joke, and it's going to take more than unions signing on to a day of action and telling people they can take personal days to attend, which again, I did. I'm happy my colleagues did. Many members did. But we need to really develop that true political strike muscle so we can launch a strike against this mayor and this governor who've really been in the background during this whole struggle. To speak to Saturday's events, I woke up, I was in my pajamas when I found out that there was another observer murdered. And I met up with a friend at the site. We wanted to go confront the ICE agents who were there. And it was just like a war zone, guys. I don't know what to say. I mean, there was tear gas. They were firing rubber bullets at us. They were shooting stun grenades. You could hear as I was pulling up, it sounded like bombs going off. And this is in the middle of the city. I live about 2 miles from there. So it was really intense. The reason why I was on this call is I had the pleasure of getting tear gassed along with Luis Feliz Leon, the labor notes journalist who was on the ground covering, and he saw my MFE hat, and I mean, we were literally talking in between rounds of getting gas shot at us. So it was it was pretty crazy, but it led to this, which is nice. I met a Palestinian guy at that event who said it was the craziest firing he'd been under since leaving the West Bank. So it really was no joke. And it really speaks volume to the fact that the police were not there. They only showed up after ICE left, and they showed up to further intimidate us. They could have been there standing in between people who came to demonstrate and the agents violently firing at us. But they didn't. They showed up after ICE left, brandishing weapons. They also fired tear gas at us. So again, like, we're going to need to build to a strike that can take on the mayor of this city, to really take on the police force of this city, because we just have a long way to go in that regard. I do want to plug some of the excellent work that's happened in our schools with our parents, especially. We have a really strong parent organization that supported our union and the contract campaign, Minneapolis Parents for Public Schools. And they've done a tremendous job delivering food for people, driving students to school. So that's been really inspiring too. So again, thanks for having us. Thanks for the support and solidarity from Minneapolis.
Thank you so much, Ari, and thank you for everything you're doing and risking by being on the ground and organizing with other people there, and for those who can't. So while I have the mic, I do want to say, just if you haven't clicked on a link yet, if you haven't donated, if you haven't committed to getting involved in an organization, to joining DSA, if you haven't written your senators and representatives, like, I don't know what to tell you. Now is the time. And people are doing it in mass. I literally just learned that we've actually raised $12,000 from the Act Blue, splitting between Twin Cities DSA and the Renters Justice Group. So let's raise 15 on the call. Like, I didn't think we were gonna get this high. So what's 3,000 more? Now is the time to really commit yourself even more to fighting fascism and committing to the idea that socialism will beat fascism. So now I'm really excited to welcome on Harper Stanfield, who is the New York Vice President of AFG Local 3911. Some of you may know that the observer who was murdered yesterday was also an AFG member. Harper is a federal worker at the Environmental Protection Agency and a member of the Federal Unionist Network Organizing Committee in New York City. He organizes with Fund NYC to build stronger federal unions and to protect federal services. So Harper, over to you.
Thank you, Grace. I'll lead with the obvious, that my views here don't reflect that of the Environmental Protection Agency. Now that I've got that out of the way, I want to talk about Alex. He was a federal worker. He was a union brother of mine. He was a dedicated public servant, the core, both in the hospital and on the streets of Minneapolis. I executed him on those streets. I hope for federal unionists around the country in saying that all of us are grieving and we're broken, but we are picking back up. We're picking each other up, and we're getting organized. Federal Unionist Network is uniting federal workers, federal union members, and their allies to protect the American public and the services that the American public depends on. To be clear, Immigration and Customs Enforcement is not one of those services. These agents are rogue, corrupt workers who have no place in the bureaucracy. Trump administration is wielding law enforcement as a cudgel against the most vulnerable members of the labor force. And I believe that federal workers have to stand together to protect families and neighbors. And federal unionists in New York City have been mobilizing for a year now to push back against ICE. It's those early days of 2025 when they started arresting immigrants in lobbies and buildings. That violence has now spread into the streets and into cities around the country, and we have to put it into it. Unfortunately, ICE and CBP have some of the highest union participation rates of any agency, and it makes sense, right? They need those unions to protect them from the consequences of their violence. I encourage anyone to go read it, but the Border Patrol Union put out a horrific statement about Alex Pretti's murder, and they will do their their all to protect their agents from any consequences. They flaunt that immunity as they abduct and slaughter and continue. In my union local, we've been organizing our members to pressure elected representatives to defund ICE, to halt this continuing resolution, recognizing that may shut the government down temporarily. It's federal workers are making that calculus for themselves and hopefully deciding that it's worth it. The comrades in FUN and the Federal Unionist Network in New York City are digging into the history of ICE and CVP unionism to understand they've been kicked out in the past. It's happened. It's complicated. It's going to be a long campaign, but we will persist. This Thursday, federal workers are uniting in Manhattan at a vigil for Alex Pretti outside of the Manhattan VA, outside of the little building where his Abby and Neisner union siblings work every day, doing the work that he cared about. We'll be there at 5 p.m. to stand in solidarity with all who loved him and his union siblings at the VA, with the Minneapolis community. And we will continue also to stand with the striking New York City Nurses Association nurses who were fighting for a fair contract, ensures safety for them and their patients. We're going to continue standing with Minneapolis as they show up every day, fight for their families and their neighbors and their communities. Hope that I will see you all on Thursday at the vigil. Thank you. I'm going to pass it back now to Gustavo. Take us away.
Thank you, Harper. So if you're joining us from New York City, Harper's Union is organizing a vigil this Thursday at 5 p.m. outside the Manhattan VA Hospital. And the link to sign up for the vigil is going to be in the chat. I know we have over 1,000 streamers joining, and we have 1,000 here in the Zoom. So we will be dropping links in both chats. And our other calls to action are for you to use our letter tool to write to your representatives to demand no funding for ICE and to donate to organizations on the ground, Twin Cities DSA and Inquilinos Unidos por Justicia, United Renters for Justice. We're going to hear next from Sean Petty, who is an RN, a member of the New York State Nurses Association, and works at the Pediatric Emergency Department at Jacobi Hospital in the Bronx.
Thanks, everybody. So there's about 1.5 feet of snow on the ground here in New York City. And if you're a nurse scheduled for today, you came to work with an overnight bag because you're staying at the hospital. That's the bad part about blizzard days. The sleeping in uncomfortable cots, the 4-hour breaks and the 12-hour shifts. But the good side is that it tends to be a slower day on the units, and there's some time for discussions. And true to form, when I first walked in, the first, as has been happening for the last couple of weeks, get bombarded and peppered with questions about the latest on the strikes here, and the nurses' strike here in New York City of our brothers and sisters in the private sector. We talked about the entrenchment of the CEOs and the depth of the greed that they're revealing to New York City right now by spending hundreds of millions of dollars on scab labor going into a third week. This is the 14th day of the strike where nurses have been without pay. Many have been cut off from health insurance. The irony of that being apparent to many. And we talked about the sacrifice that the nurses are making and why they're making that sacrifice. This is not an economic calculation for them. This is about much, much bigger dynamics. And then it obviously raises these big questions of power and, how we are wielding it, but how the bosses are wielding it as well. and how we have to figure out, how to level up in the upcoming week. Um, but after, that kind of settled down, the conversation obviously turned very quickly to what happened to Alex, and what people knew about it. And, I think enough has gone around to where people were really aware of the fact that this was just a cold-blooded murder of a nurse, um, who was seeing someone in harm and trying to do something about it, you know, basically being a nurse, which is what most of us, do daily in our jobs, and often outside of our jobs as well. And he was murdered for it. And um, it was very difficult for us to get our heads around, how we could really engage with any sort of process of how to stop this rogue gang of executioners walking around with face masks and federal badges. It truly kind of puts the stakes of what we're up against in stark relief when it's a very topsy-turvy moment, right? You get, 2 weeks of a strike, you feel incredibly confident, but yet, you're being stonewalled by your bosses. You see this incredible day of action in Minnesota on Friday, and then the very next day, a cold-blooded killing. Um, and it just does feel like the last 2 weeks between New York and Minnesota have really compressed and brought to the fore, these large forces, these large dynamics, and really crystallizing them for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Um, because of course the strike is a direct result of a shattered healthcare system. Skyrocketing healthcare costs are the driving force behind this strike. The maintenance of a for-profit healthcare system at the expense of patients, at the expense of workers. The health insurance for nurses is the signature issue of this strike, and what's compelling both sides to dig in. And of course, this has been exacerbated by the big billionaire bill passed over the summer, blowing a $15 billion hole in New York State's Medicaid budget, and also causing a massive inflationary spiral with healthcare costs. And so it's bringing these dynamics to the head, and it's making this fight that we have in New York State to tax the rich to the tune of $20 billion. That's what we need to make New York City affordable and to save our healthcare systems. And that's also, putting us on a collision course with Governor Hochul, who, by the way, is completely on the side of the hospital bosses. So, I think, that sort of dynamic of how these power dynamics are being revealed to people, and how who's on what side, when you go into these fights, and how that sharpens things, I think can be underestimated. Um, and the public couldn't be more with the strike. This is just despite massive propaganda and massive amounts of unfact-checked media coverage of that propaganda, about nurses being greedy, nurses asking for too much. The public has not heard any of it. I think that might have something to do with coming fresh off of electing a socialist mayor, and spending the last year understanding a little bit more about wealth inequality in this city. So that's, but the CEOs, even with that, they're trying to make an example out of us. And that's why this fight has come to a fever pitch. And I think that's where the parallel with Minnesota actually kind of comes together the most, because at a much grander scale, Trump and ICE are trying to make an example out of Minnesota. If we understand this to be an authoritarian maneuver, we understand that Minnesota has been a leading light for the left, and for and in terms of community and labor alignment, in terms of, developing large scale organizing to fight, and Trump sees that as something that needs to be crushed. So on one hand, you have Trump, you have the billionaires, you have the CEOs of hospitals who might be personally liberals, but certainly are part and parcel of the overall Trump agenda, as is Hochul, who is aiding and abetting the same forces that are working against us. So, I think I guess to wrap up, it was we did a little bit of an action on Friday at my hospital, which is a public sector hospital. We marched from our hospital to the picket line, and it really did, I think, help change some of the dynamics in my workplace in terms of getting people out of some of the more narrow focused things and really open up, their hearts and their minds to what solidarity feels like and looks like, and participate in this fight that has captured the city's imagination for the last 2 weeks. And I think it will make us that much more prepared for when we have to fight Hochul, when ICE comes to our city, and when we also have to confront these strategic questions about how do we elevate and coordinate amongst larger allies to actually win these fights, not just start them. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of this discussion because the stakes are getting very high for us. And the way we answer the strategic and political questions of this moment is going to take things in one direction or another. And it's not a guarantee that it's going to go well. But I think we're showing that we're in a place where we can make a massive amount of difference if we're willing to do what is necessary to, to level up our power.
Thank you for that, Sean. Okay, I want to shout out all of our co-sponsoring organizations before we continue. Uh, Starting with the Democratic Socialists of America nationally in Twin Cities, New York City. We've got Jewish Voice for Peace Action, Drumbeats from New York, Justice Democrats, UAW Region 9A, and the Federal Unionist Network. Thank you so much. We have raised over $30,000 on this call and through our text bank for the two organizations. It is pretty incredible. Solidarity to everyone who's pitching in. So Sean mentioned that we are demanding a fair contract for New York City nurses. Alex Pretti was a nurse himself. Our struggles are not confined to one city or one state. We are an internationalist movement. So we've got a QR code up on the screen for you to support the nurses in New York City with their contract. Up next, I'm really proud to introduce one of our congressional candidates. We know that in this country, there has to be consequences for the people who are responsible for the occupation that is happening in Minneapolis and everywhere in the US. And that's not just the Republicans who are directly responsible, but it is also many of the corporate Democrats who are allowing it to happen. So up next, we have Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier, who is a working class Afro-Latina and a DSA endorsed candidate for New York's 13th Congressional District. She is a public defense investigator at the Neighborhood Defenders Services of Harlem. She's organized against mass incarceration for Palestinian liberation.
Unfortunately, Gustavo's computer crashed. So Daria Lisa, jump in.
So I'm so sorry. I couldn't tell if mine crashed or his crashed.
Yeah, I also was very confused.
Sorry, I thought I
No
lost
worries.
Wi-Fi. Darlitza, I'll take over. We're so excited to have you. But please do begin speaking.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate you all having me. And, and also I'm going to apologize in advance. My radiator is very loud. So I'll try to speak up. But, I'm honored to be able to share this space with you all. Even though I am incredibly heartbroken for the reason that this call needed to be organized to begin with. The last few days have really reminded me in a very visceral way of why I became an organizer. When Trayvon Martin was killed and when this killer was acquitted, I was 18 and I was visiting friends in Tallahassee, Florida, on break from college. And I remember hearing about plans to work for a protest at the Florida State Capitol building. And when I got there, I witnessed organizers occupying the building as part of a demand for justice and for systemic change. And there were many seasoned organizers there that day, but for me, that was my introduction to what it can mean to organize, what it can mean to stand in solidarity, to work in community, to come together, to fight back against injustice, and to fight back against despair. How I felt that day, witnessing a community come together, turn their grief into solidarity to demand change, is something that has lived inside me in every organizing space I've been part of in the near decade and a half since. And, over the years, I've joined various movements for social justice that have called for an end to mass incarceration, for the liberation of Palestine, for immigration justice. And it really is working together with, my fellow New Yorkers and my friends and organizers and comrades, organizing campaigns to demand divestment from Israeli apartheid, to free people from ICE detention, to combat mass incarceration. To me, this moment highlights the importance of combating all of these things because it was mass incarceration that gave us the rise to ICE detention centers. It was the criminalization of migrants that made ICE the force that it is today. And it was the demonization of pro-Palestine protesters that paved the way for the kidnappings and murders that we're seeing on the streets in our cities today. Each of these struggles are interconnected, and this moment demands that we come together as one to fight back against fascism and the regime that's weaponizing them all. And we all know the solution. The solution is very simple. We have to abolish ICE. But I say all this to say that in my organizing, I've learned two things, both of which have been very beautifully articulated by Mariam Kaba. And the first is that nothing that we do that is worthwhile is done alone. And the second is that hope is a discipline. And I'm feeling both of those deeply tonight, seeing so many of you here. We come to calls like this not necessarily despite the despair that I know that all of us feel today, but because of it, right? It was because of our grief that compels us to action, not just to honor the memory of Alex Pretti or Renée Nicole Good or Keith Porter Jr. Or the over 37 people who've been killed by ICE or CBP or DHS in just this year alone, but also to prevent more families from feeling this type of despair. It's also, to fight back against the fascist cruelty that took their lives in the first place. And because our grief compels us to do so, to come together, to mourn together, to seek comfort together, and to take action together. And it's, through coming together that we know that we are growing our capacity to resist this terror, to resist this fascist regime that is trying to break us in this moment. And we know, and they know, that every time that we gather, every time that we organize, more of us show up. More of us are the 18-year-old version of me who showed up at a random action and got inspired to organize. Every march, every direct action, every call, every act of civil disobedience, our ability to fight back against this regime grows. And, this terror did not begin overnight. And as much as we wish it would, it won't end overnight either. But there is a path out of this darkness, and it's a path that we can only walk if we walk it together. It's the solidarity, the organizing, the collective action that each of us has been taking that will get us to the world that we're building and the world that we all deserve. So, I'm so grateful to be building this world with all of you. And for those of you who haven't already joined DSA, please join DSA. Now is the perfect time to join us in this fight and, sign up as a member, attend a meeting, help us elect the leaders that, want to abolish ICE for good. And thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate all the work you're doing and running for Congress. So, speaking of that, we've already talked about how important it is to tell our senators, our representatives to abolish ICE. They are not meeting the moment. Like, they cannot be meeting the moment any less. So, in addition to demanding action from them now, we know that we need better representatives in Congress in the future, and we need them as soon as possible. So we are asking that people who have any extra money after the incredible donations we've been making to groups on the ground in Minneapolis, if they can use that to power socialist representatives to Congress, not only Darlita, but also our next guest, who I will introduce now. So really excited to invite my comrade and friend, Assembly Member Claire Valdez, to join us next. As many of you may know, she's a union organizer, an artist, and a democratic socialist. She has worked low-wage customer service jobs throughout high school and college. Once she landed at Columbia University, she didn't just settle into that work, but she joined UAW Local 2110 and was elected as a bargaining committee leader and has since organized to democratize her union. In addition to being a union leader, she's a longtime leader in New York City DSA. She now serves in the state assembly, where she has fought to tax the rich, to protect tenants, and to empower working people. And now she's bringing that fight not only to her congressional race, but also to the fight against the fascist and ICE invasion that we're seeing in so many of our cities. Claire, welcome.
Hi, comrades. Thank you all for joining. It's really amazing to see so many people turn out on really short notice, but I think what we're seeing in the energy that's here and the folks who are live streaming on YouTube is that there's deep heartbreak and deep anger and deep need to be mobilizing together in the face of this fascist administration. Grace already gave you the spiel, but before I was in the assembly, I was a member of UAW Local 2110. I found power in my union, safety in my union, and real solidarity in my union. And what we know is happening right now is that ICE is going after undocumented workers precisely because they think that they can do it. They think they can get away with it. It's the brutality and cruelty towards the workers who are trying to provide a life for themselves and their families in New York City and Minneapolis, all over the country. The people who are the ones who are making food for us, who are delivering food for us, who are working in kitchens, who are building new housing, who clean people's homes, who look after other people's children. These are the workers who already face immense exploitation because they're thought of as replaceable. Because when they try to organize together, they're threatened with deportation because they don't have the status that other workers have. It's always been true that no one is safe until all of us are safe. And that fact is being laid bare in front of us right now. We all witnessed the murder of Alex Pretti, an AFG union nurse who was not undocumented, who was a white man, who worked at his local VA in the ICU, and who was murdered, executed in broad daylight on film, surrounded by witnesses. No one is safe from ICE and this fascist administration, and so it's incumbent on all of us to organize together to keep each other safe. ICE went after Alex because he was standing up for his neighbors and showing solidarity. Alex was doing exactly what millions of union members do every single day in this country. They stand up and they fight for the person next to them because we know that our power is in our numbers and that solidarity is our strength. We know that this is the only way that we can fight back. Standing up for our neighbors, showing solidarity, showing up, putting ourselves on the line. And Alex, what is so heartbreaking about this, about Alex's murder, about Nicole Good's murder, is that they were doing exactly what so many of us have been called to do, to bear witness, to record, to jump in front of our neighbors. And that's exactly what this moment demands. And it's incredibly scary now for us to be trying to show that kind of solidarity. But that's exactly where our power lies. The day before Alex was murdered, we saw thousands and thousands of people take to the streets in the Twin Cities in the largest general strike in a generation. I know many New Yorkers on this call were also in the street in solidarity on Friday. It was a powerful collaboration between labor unions and community organizations and faith groups and just everyday people who were angry at what their government is doing. In New York, we had unions from UAW and 1199 and DC 37. The labor movement showed up. What we saw is that people are looking for an outlet right now to get involved, to find place to house their grief, to house their anger. What we need now more than ever is a strong and vibrant labor movement. And it's a real honor to be sharing this space with so many union members and union nurses and FG members who are already doing this organizing in the Twin Cities in solidarity to my union siblings there who are weathering the storm right now with immense bravery, courage, and resilience. If you haven't yet donated, please donate. I know that we're breaking the records here on this call. $30,000 raised. It's amazing. That money is going to go to help make sure that our neighbors, our siblings out in Minneapolis can stay on the street, can stay warm, can stay fed, can stay in their homes. So if you haven't yet donated, please donate. If you haven't joined DSA, consider doing it tonight. I joined DSA in 2019 because I saw power in this movement, and as ICE comes to our doorsteps all over the country, we need to be organized together to fight back. We need to be able to send champions like Daria Lisa to Congress, like myself to Congress, to even abolish ICE once and for all. This agency has no place in American society, and it has to be abolished. I want to say solidarity to our comrades in Minneapolis, sending lots and lots of love from New York. We're with you every step of the way.
Thank you, Claire. You heard her. It's time to abolish ICE. It's time for new leadership in Congress. We can't wait any longer. Speaking of new leaders, I'm now going to bring on Abir Kawas, who is a community organizer and a Democratic Socialist running to represent parts of Northern Queens. She's the daughter of Palestinian refugees and was born and raised in New York City. When she was young, her father was detained by ICE and deported from the US by the same immigration system that's currently harming people all over the country today. While he was in detention, her family really struggled to make ends meet. And these experiences shaped how she sees the world and shaped what she is fighting and organizing for today. So I will pass it over to hear directly from Abir. And Abir, really quickly, just we're running a bit short on time. We are very excited to hear from you. But if you can keep that in mind as you speak, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you all. Thank you, Grace. And it's an honor to be on here with all of you and have a chance for us as those in New York City to be part of the movement and the struggle that's happening in Minneapolis. Like Grace said, my name is Abir Kawas. I am running for Assembly in District 34. And it's a district that is like extremely multicultural and impacted by ICE and where there are immigrants that are living in fear of ICE every single day. And today I want to talk to you very specifically about the human impact of these ICE raids and what we can do on a local level. So as some of our speakers have said, we know that ICE existing is a multi-generational issue. It has been here in multiple iterations, whether that is displacing Indigenous peoples from their homes, whether that is the slave patrols coming after slaves, and generations of workers and people who have been terrorized by agents who live to exceptionalize who gets to be part of this country. And in my own experience, I'm someone who grew up in the post 9/11 era, and that is actually where ICE was actually institutionalized in 2003. You know, like where it was built by the into the Homeland Security Department, and now we're actually seeing the institution turned into like a mercenary army, and it's extremely frightening. At that time, in the post 9/11 era, my parents were both undocumented. And I remember my parents speaking about what to do. Should they leave the country? Where should they hide if an ICE agent comes to the home? What do they do with us, their children who were born here in the United States? Do we go with them overseas? Do we stay? Where do we stay? And these were real conversations that my family was having, that I know families are having every single day, living in fear. And I lived that impact when my father was detained by ICE, held in ICE detention for 3 years, and then deported. And now my family has lived in family separation for almost 18 years now, where we've gone from the point where my father has missed his own children's birthdays and graduations and so many family memories, and now he's missing his own grandchildren's birthdays and graduations and family memories. So I really want to talk about how this has been a multi-generational attack in our communities, and the impacts are also multi-generational. When I look at the image of Liam Conejo Ramos, who, the young boy wearing the little blue hat, who was taken by ICE in Minneapolis in order to attract his parents out to be captured. I just imagine myself as a young child, my siblings. I imagine all of the other children who were sitting in waiting rooms in prisons waiting to see their parents as well. And this is something that I want to bring to local politics and as a local issue, because when ICE attacks a family, when ICE takes someone, when ICE detains someone, when ICE deports someone, it terrorizes an entire neighborhood ecosystem. It terrorizes the family and everybody who lives around them. And those impacts live with people, and they are economic impacts. They are mental health impacts. They impact their education. They impact public health. ICE existing and ICE attacking our communities is something that affects us on every single level and affects our neighbors, our communities, and it will be something that affects us 10 years from now, 20 years from now, as it has affected us decades before. And we really need to look at this fight as a holistic fight, an intergenerational fight that we are now part of. Now, I want to just say that, speaking to that, what can we do to resist this? We are calling for abolishing ICE. And, I'm speaking from someone who's running for local government, because I really believe that what we also need to do, in addition to fighting ICE, is talking about not just what we're fighting against, but what we're fighting for. So I'm calling all of you to join our campaigns to tax the rich, our campaigns to fight for free universal childcare, for fast and free buses. Because when we talk about universal childcare, I picture a woman who is actually needs someone to take care of her children while she goes and visits her partner in a detention center. I picture, when I think about fast and free buses, I think about how we had to take one bus, 2 trains, and 3 buses in New Jersey to visit my father in a detention center. These things that we are fighting for to make people's lives more dignified are going to especially impact the most marginalized communities. And when we fight for marginalized communities to have full and dignified, wholesome lives, then we are actually taking away from the dehumanization that our communities face every single day. So I want you all to be part of the movements, the movement to tax the rich, all of the campaigns that we are fighting for, the affordability agenda that we're fighting for. Join New York City DSA, door knock, be part of what we're doing. And lastly, I want to say that I really believe that this is the moment where we need to be supporting socialist candidates. And the reason that I'm saying that is because we have an administration right now that is empowering mercenaries to go in and attack our communities. And we have an administration right now who dehumanizes our communities. They speak about President Trump said the Somali community in Minneapolis is garbage, verbatim. Just was able to say this. And so when we are coming in and we are trying to fight for a different kind of politic, a left politic, a socialist politic, we should be unapologetic in that fight. We are not fringe. And when we are actually trying to create a new political system to approach politics in a different way, we are fighting against this fascism, because fascism is actually approaching politics in a different way. It's approaching politics in the most violent way possible. And we need to approach our politics in the most human way possible. We need to fight for socialist politics. It's something that people want. It's something that the thousands on the streets are calling for. And us being part of this movement is us building the beautiful, dignified world that is wholesome for for us and all of the immigrant communities that we are part of, that we come from, and that we build with. So thank you all for having me today, and much love to those in Minnesota. We are with you. We are one, and we're really looking forward to building this movement and abolishing ICE and building a beautiful, beautiful life for all of us together.
Thank you, Apir. She has summed up so well why it's so important to fight for socialist organizers at every level of government. I'm about to pass it on to a key organizer in New York City DSA's immigrant justice work. They are fighting for state level bills that include New York for All, that would make New York a sanctuary state. Dignity, not detentions, that would severely handicap ICE's ability to use jails as detention facilities. And this type of work is the bread and butter of DSA, and it happens often in the background. It happens over time until it explodes, so we can capitalize on moments like this. So I'm really excited to bring on a critical organizer for DSA and in this work. Felicia Arriaga is a bilingual Latina organizer. She's a professor and an organizer and has worked on many different efforts to tackle the intersections between ICE and law enforcement. And her book, Behind Crimmigration, ICE Law Enforcement and Resistance in America, covers these topics. She's also on the organizing committee for New York City DSA's Immigrant Justice Working Group, where she focuses on legislative efforts and also our Court Watch program. So she's going to tell you more about what they're doing, including some of our incredible Know Your Rights trainings and so much more that this working group is holding down. Felicia, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And I really just appreciate Abir's words. One of the things that we have been able to do with the working group is to connect with folks who are in detention across New York State and in other places across the country. But we've also been able to support them down at immigration court. If you've never been, this is a call for you all to join us there to support our neighbors in one of the more challenging times of their lives. The terror that we talk about when we talk about ICE in the streets, ICE is at immigration court every single week. And unfortunately, they're also there terrorizing our community members. So these are ways that you can join us here in New York City in supporting our neighbors who, unfortunately, if they are kidnapped there, are being brought to other places in New York City or across New York, out in Western New York and Batavia. Where they're far, far away from their family members and their friends. They're being taken to New Jersey, and they're being taken to other places across the country where it's really hard for them to get any kind of support. I also just want to close by letting folks know, too, that I would like us to also lift up and remember the lives of a few others who have been taken by this deportation regime. Keith Porter Jr. was mentioned earlier, who was shot on December 31st as he was celebrating New Year's Eve. The recent death of Geraldo Lunas Campos, who died in ICE custody in Texas, but was actually picked up in Western New York back in July in one of these field raids that was happening there. And lastly, but not least, Santos Reyes Banegas, who died in the Nassau County Jail last year, who was held there because of a local ICE agreement, the type that has been exploding across the country. And we know that these deaths and the countless ones that occur at the border would not have happened if we abolished ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, and instead, like many of my comrades have mentioned, invested in our communities. This last death of Santos could also have been prevented with state-level legislation that our SIOs have introduced and pushed for in New York State, and that our members are engaging with to this day and in this moment to pass New York for All and dignity, not detention. So our fight is multifaceted, but I know that together we are able to build the community that we need alongside our immigrant neighbors, because together we know that the only secure community is an organized community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will pass it over to Gustavo to close us out.
Thank you, Felicia. I'm going to keep it brief because we are now a little over time. We have up the QR code to organize with New York City DSA's Immigrant Justice Working Group. If you are in the city, we've had a number of different calls to action to join the movement. in other ways. The capitalist class has designed our political system and our world for us to feel disempowered. It is so easy and frankly understandable to respond to our current moment with cynicism and pessimism. But we know that if we unite, we are more powerful than they are. We can win. We have seen cracks starting to form. We've seen that Chuck Schumer and some of the worst Democrats in the Senate are now saying, in response to mass movements, they're not going to fund ICE this week. Um, you know, that's a step in the right direction, but we know that we can't just take their word at face value. We have to keep organizing because they will backslide. We've had so many ways to plug into the movement listed today. We're going to be sending an email to everyone who RSVP'd. We had well over 3,000 viewers, and we raised over $36,000 for the organizations in Twin Cities. Give yourself a round of applause. And we raised a few thousand for our candidates as well. Really, really pleased that we are showing how it's done. Solidarity, y'all.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the streets.